Well, now for something completely different. Yogic breathing. I have argued that my basic triangular breathing is what's, if you like, the material substance, the reality of creea type yoga. And in particular, what's the difference between that and ordinary breathing? You're holding the breath for much longer. The typical person breathes in and breathes out. They don't hold the breath. I mean, for more than a turnaround time, a second or two, if that. But it's long enough to extract the oxygen. Which, given we're not breaking down cellulose, from grasses and so on, like the cattle, is fine. We get our cellulose by consuming plant food and, food, okay? But some people don't eat. Now, I know that sounds off the planet, but there are records of people like Teresa of Bavaria during the Nazi Second World War. You had to have a permit, apparently, according to Paramahansa, to go and visit her. You had to have permission, in other words, from the local government. And he did. And there's two things that stand out in my mind. The obvious, she didn't eat for I don't know how many years or decades, apart from a wafer. And of course she had, three things. She had this amazing stigmata phenomenon where she would bleed on Friday nights through to, I'm not sure how many hours, from the hands and the feet and the forehead and the wound in the side, the crucifixion. This is an Easter story now, isn't it? But that's not the bit I'm getting at. The bit I'm getting at is that she didn't eat. And not only that, but it was mentioned, I think it was with her, or there was one of the two ladies he met that didn't eat, and she had a sunlight window, a ceiling window, which suggests she sunbathed. Paramahansa doesn't talk about sunbathing, so perhaps that's not a necessary thing, but there's something about the yogic breathing, the creea as it might be called, that allows you, like cattle, or is it like plants? No, like the plants, to build cellulose.
And sugars.
Now, plants are not taking soil and making it into tree structure and plant structure. They're taking the carbon from the air, carbon dioxide, and they're forming cellulose with it, which is just a combination of carbon and water. Carbon, oxygen and hydrogen. And this is the main structure of plants and trees and so on. Now, it means that they're making a sugar that can produce cellulose. We break down the cellulose and get sugar back. We can't make the cellulose. But if we're developed from plants, plants evolving into animals, in some sense there's a facility that might have been there at least, or is still there and redundant. And it can be activated, if you like, by holding the breath. I don't mean holding it until you're starved of oxygen and, in other words, there's going to be an optimal hold. You need a good supply of oxygen. Although if you're not using the body at all, you're just sitting there in absolute peace and serenity, presumably you need very little oxygen, as opposed to when you're running hard and you're breathing heavily. And notice when you're breathing heavily, running hard, you're breathing in and breathing out instantly, almost, you know. It's just enough flow to take out the oxygen, enough passing of air to take out the oxygen you need for the emergency of running. But if you're in absolute peace and serenity, sitting still, you're not demanding much oxygen. You can hold the breath for much longer, therefore. Still get enough oxygen that you need for normal tick over of the body, if indeed it's ticking over at all. After all, plants don't have an obvious heart that's pumping away furiously, do they? There's some argument that there is some vibratory pulse going on. In other words, a very primitive circulatory system, the sap, of course, rising, that the sap isn't just rising through capillary action, but the action of this pulsing in the vegetable itself. In other words, vegetables have the trace or the beginnings or a primitive sort of heart system going on. That's an interesting one, isn't it? But if we're able to hold the carbon dioxide long enough for it to be absorbed into the body, rather than just, oh, well, hang on, we don't need to take in carbon dioxide, we're using it in the breakdown of the cellulose that we've got from the plants. Do you see, we can do the entire recycling process within ourselves as if we were a plant body composition, which is what the body is. It's both animal and vegetable. It's not animal or vegetable, where you're one or the other. It's vegetable, and the other type of life phenomenon on Earth is vegetable animal. We're a vegetable animal, not a pure animal. But in a sense, perhaps we can advance into being a pure animal that doesn't need the vegetable intake. If we're sitting absolutely still, we're using no energy at all, especially if the heart stops. Now, the heart, we don't want the heart to stop normally, but we do like it to slow down. And if you're really calm and peaceful, the heart's ticking over more slowly, isn't it? If you're really peaceful with the breath, I don't mean straining now to hold the breath too long, but able to take long, slow breaths because you're not requiring much intake, oxygen or carbon dioxide. You get the body to a still state where you gently drift into not breathing. And I don't mean by drift die, but in a sense I do. In other words, what I'm saying is that the yogic trance is a near-death experience, and I don't mean near death, I mean pure death, the body stops. It's not generating because it's not using energy, not even the heart. You might say then, well, what kicks this over again? Well, I don't know. The same as some, let me say this, something from the spirit world kicks over, kickstart the body again, and you, oh, I'm back in this world and I've had a near-death experience, and, you know, I don't know, I saw angels and Jesus talked to me, and, you know, there was another Mary and so on. But whatever the spiritual traces and interpretation that you're left with in the mind as to the pictures, the dreams, if you like, or the experience in the spiritual near-death, for want of a better phrase, state you've just had, is left there in the form of such pictures and imagery to make sense of the experience you've had. But the experience you've had may just simply be of overwhelming love, which seems to be a regular phenomenon, most often reported from the near-death experience. You know, it may have been in the form of meeting Jesus or angels or Aunt Sally who always cared and looked after you as a child or something, you know what I mean? Whatever the words are you put to it, the word pictures, you know, pictures are words in a way, aren't they? They say a lot. And you've got it in that form because that's the form that means something to you in the brain. And you're able, presumably in this dream state, to kick back into the body functioning again, and you take a breath and, oh my goodness, he's come back, he wasn't dead after all, and everybody breathes a sigh of relief, and after a while, of course, they're used to him doing this. Oh no, he's just, he's a yogi, you know, he stops breathing, he's he's talking to God, or whatever it is, you know. So a simple thing, the creea, or what Marshall has, as an economist, reduced to simply thinking of it in terms of triangular breathing, is indeed the practice, the yoga by which you have union with God. You pass into the transcendent. Now, it may be that it's not wise to do this, you know, even if you could do it, that you're not ready for the transcendent. You know, when you die, quotes, naturally, which of course is anything but natural. I mean, you're hit by a bus or, you know, run over by a train or something, or cancer, you know, destroys the body or something. I mean, it may be that in some sense that's the natural way and your time is up appropriately. But perhaps not. Perhaps it's a catastrophe. You're meant to live forever until you're perfected here in one earth cycle, one incarnation. And then when you die, you go to heaven. Not keep coming back tortuously and arduously, you know, through the womb and then through the grave again, you know, I mean, no, it's just the unfortunate hazards of the uncertain situation in which the classroom operates. I don't mean that unfortunate, because I mean it means you can keep coming back and have more lessons, so that you do, or you may have to come back to have more lessons so that you can get to the eternal life of being right for heaven eternally. And let me just review this. I mean, I've rambled through it, haven't I? It occurs to me that it may be that the other part of the Kriya Yoga, which is what the mind's doing, that Paramahansa, in teaching Kriya Yoga, obviously refers to as well, may be crucial, maybe, in that perhaps the mind, after all, much of the, when you're sitting quietly, much of the body's oxygen is taken up by brain activity. So if you can calm the brain, stop it furiously, the computer's burning away power, isn't it? You know what I mean? The brain is burning away energy and therefore needing a supply of oxygen and the heart pumping and so on. If you can calm the mind, by which I mean now, I think, not going as far as the thoughts activate the brain, but obviously to be in the, what we call here, ecstatic state, you need to have some thought function that's not requiring anything from a recycling process, not requiring the body any longer. So I've got two situations. I've got Saint Teresa, oh sorry, not Saint, well no, she was Teresa of Bavaria anyway, well she was referred to as a saint by Paramahansa, but anyway, the saints that don't eat. This is not an easy thing to run with, I know it's an assumption, but assuming there are such persons, do nonetheless talk to people and, live during the week and so on, in the case of the Catholic lady, her weekly demonstrations of the stigmata. But I mean, she's talking to people and she's moving around the house presumably and doesn't go out much, but but she is alive in this world. You can do that without eating. And the breathing technique allows you to I wonder if the body's continuing in a perpetual recycle process. That's right, when she's in trance, and when she comes back to not being in trance, but living and talking to the people in the household, and the professor who is monitoring her body functioning and so on, because he's fascinated by this phenomena, German chap presumably as well. Austrian, is it? Yeah, Austria. And I mean, the whole point is when Paramahansa dies, they're amazed at the morgue that the body is not fermenting, it's not decaying. In other words, he's left the body in perpetual, and some graves that have been exhumed, bodies exhumed, hundreds of years afterwards have been reported to be in perfect shape, not deteriorated, not rotted away. So if you have a saint, don't embalm him and fill him with, get rid of all the blood and fill his body with formaldehyde. I mean, you might be spoiling something there. It's not required. Well, not required and a menace, really, because once you put formaldehyde in there, no doubt the body just falls to pieces after a while, although it preserves it for a long while, I gather. I don't know. Don't need to know, do we? That's the point. What we do know, or what Paramahansa would claim to know, and people like him, is that what he experiences can be experienced. Stops breathing, heart stops, and he has these ecstatic experiences. And people recount such when they come back and return to what we think of as living again. But yes, this point I'm thinking of here, it's not just slowing the body breathing down, but perhaps the mantra type approach. You see, even if you're counting the breathing, you're doing a mantra, aren't you? You know, Marshall's counting 1, 10, counting to 7, hold for 7, breathe out to 7. And he can do it, hold to 14 or 17 and breathe out, hold it to 17 and breathe out for 17. That's about the furthest I've got. And I don't do that normally. I normally just do 7s these days. I could easily change it to normally doing 10s. Perhaps one's meant to. I could practice extending it without stressing the body, of course. I'm not out to stress the body. I'm out to utterly relax the body, aren't I? Strange experiments, aren't they? You may find, it's even strange recording this too. Marshall's away with the fairies again. We'll see about that. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.